The fluorescent lights of the Galactic Council's diplomatic chamber hummed softly overhead, casting an unnaturally sterile glow across the elaborate meeting table. Ambassador Janet Chen resisted the urge to fidget as she watched the double doors at the far end of the chamber slide open with a pneumatic hiss. The moment the alien dignitary entered, flanked by guards in gleaming armor that seemed to shimmer between states of matter, Janet knew this meeting would test every diplomatic skill she had developed over her 15-year career. Welcome. And hello, Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty. Supreme Plop, can I call you Supreme Plop for short? This meeting would go on rather long if I had to use your full title every time. Why do you even feel the need to use Supreme twice anyway? And why must every word be capitalized? Actually, never mind. Tell me later. So what brings you here? Janet's words flowed with practiced ease, her smile warm yet professional, as she gestured to the ornate chair across from her. Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop twitched in frustration, the 7 tentacles that formed his facial structure rippling with barely contained emotion. This human dares disrespect him by asking to skip out on his full name and title of Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop. But such annoyances are why Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop decided to this meeting today, upon the Galactic Official Council. Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop, said Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop, making sure to properly emphasize each word as if to prove a point, is here to give the humans the humbling they so deserve. The empire of Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop is feared more than any other in the galaxy, yet you humans always behave so carefree around my people. Enough is enough. Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop will put you humans in your place. Janet stared with a confused expression for a moment before responding. Is this about forgetting to bring you a gift for your birthday last year? We said we are sorry. The birthday of Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop is not the issue here, although that really hurt my feelings. Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop is here to declare war on humanity. Nope. Twitching ever more angrily, Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop slammed his fist onto the table and shouted, "What? You dare just whatever that was to Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop. You will be the first to die in nope. I formally decline your declaration of war. Have a nice day." What? You can't do that. You can't just decline a war. Actually, under Galactic Standard Law, Section 69 Paragraph 420, it clearly states that humans have the right to decline declarations of war. Here read it. Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop studied the relevant rules with a focus born of cold fury, only to see the human had told the truth. In black and white without interpretation, the human's claim lay true. Oh, well then, Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop wishes you a good day. See you at golf tomorrow. As the towering alien dignitary turned to leave, his entourage of guards struggling to maintain formation around his massive frame, Janet let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The doors slid shut, and she allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. This was far from over, she knew, but she had bought humanity some time. The truth was, there was no Section 69, Paragraph 420 in the Galactic Standard Law that allowed humans to decline war declarations. Janet had simply been bluffing, counting on the Plopians' notorious obsession with bureaucracy and their reluctance to admit ignorance about any legal matters. And Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop had fallen for it completely. Janet activated her comlink, connecting directly to the United Earth Security Council. "We've got a problem," she said, her voice now stripped of its diplomatic pleasantness. "The Plopians are looking for a war, and I've only bought us 24 hours at most before they figure out I've been bluffing." Admiral Helena Reyes's holographic image flickered to life above Janet's wrist device. "We suspected this might happen. The Plopians have been mobilizing their fleet for weeks. Intelligence suggests they're desperate for Earth's water resources after their homeworld's contamination crisis." "It's more than that," Janet replied, gathering her notes. This felt personal. Supreme Plop mentioned something about us being too carefree around his people. "I think we've been unknowingly insulting them for years. Cultural misunderstanding, possibly. But I need to know what our options are. Can we actually defend against a Plopian invasion?" Admiral Reyes's expression darkened. "Not conventionally. Their technological advantage is significant. However, Commander Zhang has been working on something that might give us an edge. It's experimental, but whatever it is, we need it ready by tomorrow." Janet interrupted. "I have a golf game with Supreme Plop, and I'm going to need more than a solid handicap to keep Earth safe." Miles away, in the subterranean laboratories beneath New Geneva, Commander Liam Zhang stood before a massive holographic display that showed a three-dimensional model of what appeared to be a small satellite. Except it wasn't a satellite at all. "The Diplomatic Inference Neural Gateway," Zhang explained to the assembled scientists and military officials. "DIN for short." General Okafor frowned. "You named our last hope for humanity, DIN." Zhang shrugged. The naming committee was under a lot of pressure, but what it does is far more important than what we call it. DIN can analyze the neural patterns of any sentient species and determine their true intentions, emotional states, and cultural taboos in real time. "And this helps us how?" someone asked from the back of the room. "Because," Zhang said, enlarging a section of the hologram, "it can also project a field that alters how other species perceive human communication. In essence, it translates not just our words, but our mannerisms, tone, and cultural context into something the recipient's brain can process without misunderstanding." General Okafor's eyes widened. "You're saying we could avoid offending the Plopians accidentally?" "Precisely. And more importantly, we might finally understand what we've been doing to antagonize them all these years." As the meeting continued, discussing deployment strategies and potential fallout scenarios, Janet Chen was already en route to New Geneva. If DIN was their best hope, she needed to understand exactly how it worked before facing Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty. Supreme Plop on the golf course tomorrow. The transport shuttle hummed quietly as it cut through the night sky, its stealth systems engaged to avoid detection by any potential Plopian scouts. Janet reviewed her notes on Plopian culture, sparse as they were. Despite nearly a decade of diplomatic relations, humans knew remarkably little about the inner workings of Plopian society. They were an ancient species, having achieved spaceflight when humans were still figuring out agriculture. Their empire spanned 17 star systems, yet they had always been reluctant to share their technology or cultural practices with other species. The little information Earth had gathered came from careful observation and occasional slips in the Plopians' otherwise impenetrable diplomatic facade. What Janet did know was that hierarchy was central to their society. Titles weren't just formalities, they were integral to a Plopian's identity. To abbreviate or forget a title was considered deeply offensive, akin to denying someone's very existence. Ambassador Chen, the shuttle's AI announced, "We are approaching New Geneva, ETA 3 minutes." Janet nodded, tucking her notes away. She couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's typical casual approach to diplomacy, which had served them well with most other species, had been their downfall with the Plopians. But why had it taken so long for tensions to reach this point? What had changed? The shuttle descended through a camouflaged opening in what appeared to be an ordinary mountain, revealing a vast underground complex buzzing with activity. As soon as the craft touched down, Janet was greeted by Commander Zhang himself. "Ambassador," he said, offering a crisp salute. "We've been expecting you. Dian is ready for demonstration." Janet followed Zhang through a series of security checkpoints, each more stringent than the last, until they reached a laboratory that seemed to pulse with energy. In the center stood a device no larger than a golf ball, suspended in a containment field. "That's it?" Janet asked, unable to hide her disappointment. "That's our salvation," Zhang smiled. "Size isn't everything, Ambassador. Dian's quantum processors can perform calculations that would take conventional supercomputers centuries to complete, and its neural interface is designed to work with any sentient brain pattern we've ever encountered, including Plopian. Especially Plopian. Their brains are fascinatingly complex, three-lobed structures with neural pathways that operate on quantum principles. It's why they've been so difficult to understand." Janet approached the device cautiously. "And this will help me understand what we've been doing wrong." "Better than that," Zhang replied, picking up what looked like an ordinary earpiece. "This receiver will allow you to perceive Plopian communication as they intend it, not as your human brain interprets it. And when you speak, it will modulate your neural output to ensure the Plopian receives your intended meaning." Janet took the earpiece, turning it over in her palm. "It's that simple." "The technology is anything but simple, but its use is, yes. We've programmed it with all available data on Plopian culture and linguistics. It should provide approximately 97% accuracy in translation and interpretation. And the other 3%, Zhang's expression grew serious. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." As Janet prepared for her meeting with Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop, halfway across the galaxy, on the Plopian royal vessel, a very different conversation was taking place. Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop shed his formal exoskeleton as he entered his private chambers, revealing a much smaller, almost fragile-looking being beneath. His chief advisor, Grand Vizier Magnificent Splendor Eternal Glory Plip, waited with a datapad ready. "The humans continue to mock us," Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop said, his voice now lacking the bombastic quality it had held in the council chamber. "They show no respect for our traditions, our hierarchy, or our very existence. Perhaps they simply do not understand your multiplicitous magnificence," Plip suggested gently. "Humans are young as a species. Their neural structures are simplistic compared to ours." Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop waved a tentacle dismissively. "I have been patient. For years, I have endured their casual dismissals, their abbreviated addresses, their refusal to acknowledge my supreme status. But when they failed to appear at the ceremony of eternal bonding, the birthday celebration," Plip translated for his own clarity, "it became clear that they are not merely ignorant, they are willfully disrespectful." Plip consulted his datapad. "Our intelligence suggests that humans do not attach the same significance to ceremonial gift-giving as we do. In their culture, missing such an event is considered a minor social faux pas, not a declaration of hostility. Then they should have studied our ways more carefully before entering into diplomatic relations." Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop's tentacles flared in agitation. "The water crisis on our homeworld grows worse by the day. We need Earth's resources, and I had hoped to negotiate a fair exchange. But their behavior has made negotiation impossible. And yet," Plip noted, "the human ambassador invoked Galactic standard law to avoid conflict, a law that does not exist." Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop's 3 eyes blinked in sequence. Explain. I took the liberty of reviewing the complete Galactic Standard Law during your return journey. There is no Section 69, Paragraph 420, that allows humans to decline war declarations. The ambassador was bluffing. For a moment, Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop was silent, his tentacles perfectly still. Then, unexpectedly, he began to vibrate in what Plip recognized as Plopian laughter. She lied. Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop said, his voice tinged with what might have been admiration. She looked me directly in my central eye and lied without hesitation. Yes, your unparalleled excellence. How refreshing. Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop moved to his viewing portal, gazing out at the stars. Perhaps there is more to these humans than I have given them credit for. This golf game tomorrow may prove interesting after all. Plip approached cautiously. Shall I prepare the fleet for invasion? Nonetheless, keep them on standby. Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop decided. I wish to see what other surprises Ambassador Chen has in store for me. The next morning, Janet arrived at the Lunar Diplomatic Golf Course, a marvel of terraforming and gravity manipulation that allowed for an Earth-like golfing experience on the Moon's surface. The course had been specifically designed to accommodate various alien physiologies, with adaptive terrain and atmospheric bubbles that could be customized for any species' comfort. Janet wore the earpiece Zhang had given her, now disguised as a standard translator device. Dian itself had been miniaturized further and incorporated into her golf glove, invisible to casual inspection. As she approached the first tee, she saw Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop already waiting, his massive form draped in what appeared to be the Plopian equivalent of golf attire, a series of interlocking plates that shifted color with his movements. Good morning, Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop, Janet said, making sure to enunciate each word of his title clearly. Thank you for agreeing to continue our conversation in this setting. The earpiece hummed to life, and Janet felt a strange tingling sensation as Dian began analyzing the neural patterns emanating from the Plopian leader. Ambassador Chen, Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop, replied, his voice somehow different through the translation matrix, more nuanced, with layers of meaning Janet had never detected before. Your decision to suggest this venue was unexpected. Janet smiled. I find that friendly competition often helps clear the air between potential adversaries. Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop selected a club from his bag, a custom-made implement that accommodated his tentacular grip. Indeed, though I must warn you, I have been practicing this strange human ritual extensively. I look forward to the challenge, Janet replied, selecting her own driver. Shall we begin? As they played through the first few holes, Janet gradually began to understand what Dian was revealing. The Plopian language was far more complex than humans had realized. Each word carried not just its literal meaning, but contextual, historical, and emotional information that was completely lost in standard translation. When Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop spoke his own title, Dian revealed that it wasn't merely a name and rank, it was a comprehensive identifier that included his lineage, his achievements, his place in the cosmic order, and his relationship to every other being in the universe. To abbreviate it was, quite literally, to deny significant aspects of his existence. As they approached the 7th hole, Janet decided to test her new understanding. Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop, she said, the earpiece guiding her inflection to match Plopian speech patterns. I believe there may have been a misunderstanding between our species. Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop paused, his club hovering over the ball. Oh, when humans suggest abbreviating your title, it is not meant as disrespect. In our culture, brevity in address is often a sign of familiarity, of friendship. Through Dian, Janet could sense the complex emotions swirling through the Plopian leader: surprise, skepticism, and something like cautious hope. You consider Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop a friend? He asked, his voice carrying tones that Janet had never been able to perceive before. We would like to, Janet replied carefully. Earth values its relationship with the Plopian Empire. We recognize your ancient wisdom and technological achievements. But friendship requires understanding, and I fear we have misunderstood each other badly. Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop was silent for a long moment. Then, in a gesture Janet had never seen a Plopian make, he retracted his central eye, a sign of vulnerability and trust. The misunderstanding may not be entirely one-sided, he admitted. Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop has perhaps been overly sensitive to perceived slights. Janet nodded, encouraged by this admission. Perhaps we could start anew, with a clearer understanding of each other's cultures and intentions. That would be acceptable. Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop said, his tentacles relaxing slightly. Though there remains the matter of our water crisis. Janet saw her opening. Earth has abundant water resources that we would be willing to share through a fair trade agreement. Perhaps we could discuss terms that would benefit both our worlds. Supreme Grand Overlord King, His High Majesty, Supreme Plop's tentacles flared in what Deng translated as pleased surprise. You would negotiate with us, even after our declaration? Diplomacy is always preferable to conflict, Janet said simply. And I believe we have more to gain as allies than as adversaries. As they continued their game, the conversation shifted from potential war to possible cooperation. Janet learned that the Plopian homeworld was suffering from a severe shortage of uncontaminated water, the result of centuries of industrial development without proper environmental safeguards. Earth's water purification technology, combined with a reasonable trade agreement for surplus water, could save millions of Plopian lives. In return, the Plopians could offer advancements in quantum computing and space travel that would accelerate human development by centuries. By the time they reached the 18th hole, the foundation for a new alliance had been laid. Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop took his final putt, sinking the ball with surprising grace. It seems, he said, his voice carrying warmth, that Janet could now perceive that Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop has much to learn about human ways. Janet smiled. And we have much to learn about Plopian culture. But I believe we've made an excellent start today. As they walked back toward the clubhouse, Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop made an unexpected gesture, extending one of his smaller tentacles toward Janet. Deng translated this as an offer of personal connection, something typically reserved for close associates in Plopian society. Janet accepted the gesture, placing her hand gently against the tentacle. Thank you for your patience and understanding, Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop. In the spirit of this new understanding, the Plopian leader said, his neural patterns indicating sincere effort. You may, when we are in private conversation such as this, address me as Supreme Plop. Janet felt the weight of this concession through Deng. Janet Cowdert's translation. It was an extraordinary honor, one that would normally require years of loyal service to earn. Thank you, Supreme Plop, she replied, the earpiece guiding her to use the proper inflection that conveyed appropriate respect while acknowledging the privilege granted. I am deeply honored, As they parted ways, Janet sent an encrypted message to Admiral Reyes, war averted. Trade negotiations beginning. Deng works better than we could have hoped. The reply came quickly. Excellent work, Ambassador. The Security Council will be relieved. But keep Deng active at all times. Trust, but verify. Janet watched as Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop boarded his shuttle, his entourage falling into formation around him. She couldn't help but wonder what other misunderstandings might exist between humans and the various alien species they had encountered. How many conflicts could have been avoided with better communication? How many opportunities had been missed? The following weeks saw intense negotiations between Earth and the Plopian Empire, with Deng facilitating true understanding. Progress was rapid. Water purification systems were designed for Plopian physiology, and shipments of fresh water began to alleviate the crisis on their homeworld. In return, Plopian scientists shared insights into quantum entanglement that revolutionized human communication technology. The first prototype of a faster-than-light communications array was already being tested in Earth orbit, potentially opening up new regions of the galaxy for exploration. 2 months after the golf game that changed interstellar relations, Janet found herself back in the same diplomatic chamber where Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop had first declared war. This time, however, the atmosphere was entirely different. Representatives from 12 species had gathered to witness the signing of the Galactic Cultural Exchange Treaty, a groundbreaking agreement that would establish protocols for cross-species communication and cultural understanding. Janet had brought Deng to the attention of the Galactic Council, presenting it as a tool for fostering better relations between diverse species. The technology had been adapted for use by all member races, with safeguards to prevent its misuse for espionage or manipulation. As Janet prepared to address the assembly, she caught Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop's eye across the chamber. The Plopian leader inclined his central eye in acknowledgement, a gesture of respect that Janet would have missed entirely without Deng. Janet Cowdert's assistants. Distinguished representatives, Janet began, her words being translated into 17 different languages simultaneously. Today marks a new chapter in galactic history. For too long we have allowed simple misunderstandings to drive us apart, to create tensions where none need exist. She gestured to the small device now installed in the center of the chamber. This cultural interface matrix, based on Earth's Deng technology and enhanced by Plopian quantum principles, will allow us to truly understand each other for the first time. Not just the words we speak, but the cultural context, the emotional nuances, the true intentions behind our communication. The representatives murmured among themselves, their neural patterns displaying a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and hope. Some may fear that such deep understanding might erase the beautiful diversity of our cultures. Janet continued, but I believe the opposite is true. By truly comprehending each other's differences, we can celebrate them more fully. We can learn from each other without fear of giving offense or being misunderstood. Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop rose to speak, his imposing form commanding immediate attention. The Empire of Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop has existed for millennia, he said, his words flowing through the new translation matrix with perfect clarity. In all that time, we have maintained a policy of limited engagement with younger species, fearing that our ways would be misunderstood or disrespected. He extended a tentacle toward Janet. But Ambassador Chen has shown us that understanding is possible, even between species as different as humans and Plopians. With this new technology, we need no longer fear being misunderstood. We can engage fully, sharing our knowledge and culture without reservation. The treaty was signed unanimously, launching a new era of interstellar cooperation. As the formal ceremony concluded, Janet found herself face to face with Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop once more. "You have done a remarkable thing, Ambassador," he said, his neural patterns conveying genuine admiration. "Few beings in galactic history have averted a war and established lasting peace in the span of a single golf game." Janet smiled. "I had help. Deng deserves most of the credit." "No," Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop replied, his central eye fixed on her. "The device merely facilitated understanding. It was your willingness to understand, your respect for our ways even when they seemed alien to you, that made the difference." He extended a formal tentacle. "The Plopian High Council has requested that you be appointed as Earth's permanent ambassador to our world. We would be honored by your acceptance." Janet felt a surge of emotion, surprise, honor, and a touch of anxiety. Such a position would mean leaving Earth for extended periods, immersing herself completely in Plopian culture. It would be challenging, possibly even dangerous. But it would also be an unprecedented opportunity to deepen the understanding between their species, to build something lasting from what had almost been a catastrophic war. "I would be honored to accept," she said, taking the offered tentacle. As they parted ways, Janet couldn't help but reflect on how close they had come to conflict. A single misunderstanding, amplified over years of diplomatic relations, had nearly led to war. How many other potential friends and allies were out there, separated from humanity only by barriers of miscomprehension? With Deng technology now spreading throughout the galaxy, such barriers were coming down rapidly. Reports were already coming in of long-standing conflicts resolving themselves once the parties involved could truly understand each other's perspectives. Janet boarded her shuttle for the journey back to Earth, where she would prepare for her new assignment. As the craft lifted off, she caught a glimpse of Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop watching from a viewport, his tentacles raised in a gesture that Deng translated as hopeful farewell. 6 months later, Janet stood on the surface of Plopia Prime, the ancient homeworld of the Plopian Empire. The landscape was alien yet hauntingly beautiful, vast crystalline structures rising from purple seas, under a sky that shimmered with aurora-like phenomena. She had spent the intervening months learning everything she could about Plopian culture, history, and biology. Deng had been invaluable, allowing her to absorb information at an unprecedented rate, and with perfect comprehension. Now, as she prepared for her formal presentation to the Plopian High Council, she felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. She would be the first human to address the council directly, an honor usually reserved for species with at least a millennium of spacefaring history. Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop had arranged for her to stay in the Royal Diplomatic Compound, a structure that dated back over 10,000 years. Her quarters had been carefully adapted for human physiology, with Earth-normal gravity and atmosphere. As she donned the ceremonial robes that had been prepared for her, a complex garment of interlocking plates, similar to those worn by Plopians, but designed for human anatomy, her communication device chimed. "Ambassador Chen," came the voice of Commander Zhang, checking in as scheduled. "How are the preparations going?" "Better than expected," Janet replied, adjusting the final piece of her outfit. "Deng has been performing flawlessly. I'm starting to pick up on Plopian social cues, even without the translation matrix." "Excellent, and there's been no sign of resistance to your presence or the alliance?" Janet hesitated. "There are conservative factions who view closer ties with humanity as a dilution of Plopian culture, but they're a minority. Most Plopians I've encountered have been curious, even eager to learn about Earth." "Good to hear. The water purification project is ahead of schedule on our end. The first shipment of advanced filtration systems should reach Plopia Prime within the week." "That's perfect timing. My presentation to the High Council today will focus on the long-term benefits of the water trade agreement. Having tangible results to point to will strengthen my case. There was a pause before Zhang spoke again. Janet, be careful. Deng is revolutionary, but it's not infallible. Cultural understanding goes beyond mere translation. I know, Janet replied, thinking of the countless subtleties she had learned about Plopian interaction that no device could fully capture. But it's given us a foundation to build on. The rest is up to us. As she ended the call, a soft chime indicated that her Plopian escort had arrived. Taking a deep breath, Janet activated her Deng interface and stepped out to meet them. The High Council chamber was a vast amphitheater carved from a single enormous crystal, its facets refracting light in hypnotic patterns. 300 Plopian councillors occupied tiered seating that rose in concentric circles around a central speaking platform. Janet stood on this platform, feeling the weight of thousands of years of history pressing down upon her. Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop occupied an elevated position at the head of the chamber, his ceremonial regalia gleaming under the crystalline lights. Esteemed members of the High Council, Janet began, her voice amplified and translated by Deng. I stand before you today, not merely as an ambassador of Earth, but as a representative of a new era in galactic relations. She could sense the neural patterns of the assembled councillors, curiosity, skepticism, and in some cases outright hostility. But she pressed on, drawing on everything she had learned about Plopian rhetoric and cultural values. For millennia, the Plopian Empire has been a beacon of stability and wisdom in the galaxy. Your technological achievements, your philosophical traditions, your commitment to cosmic harmony, all these have made you leaders among spacefaring civilizations. She paused, allowing Deng to adjust her neural output to match Plopian patterns of formal address. Humanity is young by comparison. We have made mistakes in our journey to the stars. We have sometimes acted without full understanding of the consequences of our actions. A murmur ran through the council, the neural patterns shifting toward approval at this acknowledgement of human limitations. But what we lack in age, we make up for in adaptability, in innovation, in our capacity for growth and change. These are qualities that complement the stability and wisdom of Plopia. Janet gestured to a holographic display that materialized above the platform, showing the water purification systems being installed on Plopian colony worlds. Already, our alliance has begun to bear fruit. Earth's fresh water and filtration technology are helping to address the crisis that has plagued Plopian worlds for generations. The display shifted, showing quantum communication arrays being constructed in Earth orbit, and Plopian quantum technology is revolutionizing human communication systems, opening new possibilities for exploration and discovery. She turned slowly, making eye contact with councillors from each section of the chamber. But this is only the beginning. I propose a comprehensive cultural exchange program, one that goes beyond mere technology transfer. Art, philosophy, science, governance, all these are areas where our species can learn from each other. For the next hour, Janet outlined her vision for human-Plopian cooperation. Deng worked flawlessly, not just translating her words, but adapting her neural patterns to convey concepts that had no direct equivalent in human experience. When she finished, there was a moment of profound silence. Then from the highest tier of the council chamber, a voice spoke, ancient, resonant, and carrying the weight of thousands of years. We have heard the words of the human ambassador, said the Elder of Remembrance, a Plopian so old that his tentacles had faded to translucent wisps. They are well spoken, but words are ephemeral. What guarantee do we have that human intentions will not change with their next election cycle? It was a fair question, one that Janet had anticipated. Elder of Remembrance, you speak with the wisdom of ages. Humans are indeed changeable, our political systems fluid compared to the stability of Plopian governance. But some principles transcend political shifts. She activated another holographic display, showing the text of the Earth-Plopia Treaty. This agreement has been ratified not just by Earth's current government, but by a supermajority that ensures its provisions will endure regardless of political change. Moreover, the benefits of our alliance are already becoming so integral to both our societies that severing them would harm both our peoples. The elders' neural patterns indicated cautious acceptance. And what of cultural contamination? Humans have a history of exporting their values along with their technology. Janet nodded. This concern is valid, and it is shared by many on Earth regarding Plopian influence. That is why our cultural exchange program emphasizes mutual respect and clear boundaries. We do not seek to change who you are, nor should you seek to change us. Rather, we hope to grow together, each maintaining our unique identity while learning from the other. The debate continued for hours, with counselors from various factions raising questions and concerns. Janet addressed each one, her responses guided by Jian.'s translations, but infused with her own diplomatic experience and genuine commitment to the alliance. Finally, Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop rose to speak. The Council has heard enough. We will now vote on the proposal for expanded cultural exchange between the Empire of Supreme Grand Overlord King His High Majesty Supreme Plop and the planet Earth. Janet held her breath as the voting commenced, each counselor's neural pattern registering their decision in the central crystal. The patterns merged, swirling in complex three-dimensional patterns that even Ding struggled to interpret fully. Then, with a sound like distant chimes, the crystal glowed green. The Plopian